Okay, so Thomas here can lead us right into this next article that I want to share with you guys. He said, housing prices keep rising and the Fed still buys billions in mortgage-backed securities. They're also buying bonds, they're buying assets, they're buying everything to try to keep the economy running. Student loan forgiveness could have freed up millennials for home ownership. You're 100% right, Thomas. The reason I'm using your comment here to kind of lead us in is because the thread that I want to read to you first before we go into the Wall Street Journal article talks directly about home ownership with millennials and what some of these big pension funds, big financial institutions are doing to prevent home ownership, especially from like people like me. I rent this apartment from people like me who have first-time home ownership. It's going to become even more difficult to buy a home, I think, in the future, not just because interest rates are going to go up, which makes it less of a home that I can afford, and also probably needing more of a down payment. But also we have this issue with companies, institutions, if you'd like to call them that, like Blackrock, who are buying single family houses, paying 20 to 50% above asking price, outbidding normal people like me. So why is this happening and what does it lead to? I want to share this thread with you from Cultural Husbandry. You guys can go check this out on Twitter. I'll put the link here in the chat so you guys can follow along if you'd like. But I think it's really important that we discuss this. So before we get into the Wall Street Journal article, I want to read to you the thread. It says, pension funds are buying entire neighborhoods from underneath the middle class. Let's take a look. Homes are popping up on the MLS and going under contract within a few hours. BlackRock, among others, are buying up thousands of homes and entire neighborhoods. Now, again, if you followed my other videos, we've talked a lot about the Great Reset. We've talked a lot about that idea that the World Economic Forum is pushing out publicly, saying by 2030, you will own nothing and be happy. So how do we get on the other side of that? Because I know I don't want to own nothing. I'm sure you're watching this and listening to me because you're the same way. So let's just keep reading. So who is BlackRock? It's only the world's largest asset manager and the leading proponent of the Great Reset, like I just mentioned. They're looking to redistribute, get this, $120 trillion, not billion, trillion, which is the entire wealth of the world's middle class and poor combined several times over. As an example, a 124 new home neighborhood was bought in its entirety in Texas. Average Americans were outbid to a tune of $32 million. Homes sold at an average of 20% above listing. Now the entire neighborhood is made up of SFRs. What are SFRs? Single family rentals. Now, your potential lower to middle class homeowner is positioned to be a permanent renter. Just because big institutions are buying up houses because they have a lot of cash on hand right now because the Fed is giving out free money, so to speak, by keeping assets and bonds and keeping their stimulus going. It says here, this matters, turning these homes from potential permanent ownership homes into renters. This matters because the lower and middle class owning a home is the most important part in them taking a step towards financial independence, towards actually building wealth. So if these big institutions and big hedge funds and pension funds and big companies like BlackRock can step in, aligned with the World Economic Forum, and prevent us from home ownership for a lot of people that don't get into stocks and stuff like that, the only other way to build wealth is through real estate. Long-term wealth really starts with real estate for a lot of people. So they're cutting that spigot, that stream, completely off. This is wealth redistribution, and it ain't rich people's wealth that's getting redistributed. It's the normal American middle class. And again, middle class, you can make $400,000 a year and you're still middle class. You could really, in my opinion, you don't get above middle class until you're pulling home at least $1 million a year. That's the way that I look at it nowadays. I think anybody, even if your business generates $1 million, you're not taking home $1 million. You've got expenses and taxes. When you take home $1 million, I think you're above middle class. And that literally, again, leaves just a very small percentage-wise of the population that is above that. It's very, very small percentage-wise. So it's just distributing the wealth from the most of us to the small people. It says here, home equity is the main financial element that the middle class families use to build wealth, and BlackRock, a Federal Reserve funded financial institution, is buying up all the houses to make sure that young families can't build wealth. Now, what's crazy about that is they're a Federal Reserve funded institution, not a government funded institution. Those are different things. The Federal Reserve is not the government. Okay? And again, the tweet says, that's right, Federal Reserve funded institution. Let that sink in for a second. They're using tax dollars to fuck over the lower and middle class, and it's permanent. Not one president administration of, not one press, it says, He means not one president administration of bullshit. This is a fundamental reorganization of society. Fundamental reorganization of society. So where does this position the average American in 30 years when it's a given that every new neighborhood is to be bought up whole so they can be utilized for rentals? It positions them as peasants, he says. Being poor can be temporary condition, bettered by upward mobility. But if you cut off that upward mobility, those poor people stay poor forever. And letting people buy houses and own them is a big step towards building wealth and getting out of that bottom level. It says here, in the US and other nations, home ownership is often the first and most vital step. This can provide for generational wealth and success. But as permanent, guaranteed renters, you're pissing away a lifetime of equity for the chance of mobility. You just become a peasant. It's crazy, but it's true. The Great Reset is real, he says. It is happening. This will be the greatest transfer of wealth and the greatest consolidation of power in the history of mankind. If they get away with it, revolution will be the only cure, and it will be awful. Wake up and get active now. This is warfare, make no doubt about it. Lloyds Bank in London is doing it. Lloyds Bank in London is doing it, as is every great financial institution across the world. This must be stopped. It's a greater threat than the slow creep of communism, Black Lives Matter, or anything else you can think combined. It's a death stroke. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street control $20 trillion of assets. $20 trillion. BlackRock alone has a $10 billion a year surplus. That means with 5 to 20% down, they can get mortgages on $130,000 to $170,000 homes every year. Or they can outright buy 30K homes every year. Just BlackRock. So they can get mortgages on about 200,000 homes every year. Just BlackRock. Now, we know there's a lot of homes in America, but right now, everybody wants to buy. So it's even a smaller pot for them to pull from, making it harder for people like me in the future that want to potentially buy a house to even find one. Now, imagine every major institute is doing this, because they are, and it can be such a fast sweep in action that in 30 years, there might not be anything left. So let's go, again, I shared this tweet in the link with you guys. This is the article that he refers to that kind of stemmed that whole thread. This is a very long article. You can go read it if you'd like. Just look at one of the statistics here. I love my charts. The Great Recession, not the Great Depression, the Great Recession in 2008, the total value of U.S. rental homes dropped to about $2 trillion. Today, it's more than double that. It's almost $5 trillion in rental homes. So that statistic alone shows you that since 2008, these companies have been doing this. It's just getting accelerated now as we get closer to their goal of by 2030, you will own nothing and you're going to be happy about it. So I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you to go buy a house right now. I'm here to bring awareness to these issues because I don't want it to seem like it came out of nowhere when just this one little chart and that one little Twitter thread can prove to you that it's been happening and it is happening now at an escalated rate by these companies that just have so much control and so much money, so much power that they almost don't know what to do with it. So by converting all of these homes into rental homes, they're going to create income for themselves perpetually, forever. And that's going to prevent people like you and me who don't even own a home yet from actually taking that first step and buying a home and maybe carving out a little equity to build home ownership in. So I think it's important for us to be aware of this coming, and it's important for us to understand that it is not out of left field. They're publicly talking about this. The World Economic Forum is talking about the Great Reset, and BlackRock is owned by the Fed. The Fed is a part of these NGOs, the non-governmental organizations. The Fed is very closely similar to the World Economic Forum. All the guys that are affiliated with them all hang out and talk together. These are the people that run the world in a way. So I'm not into the whole, it's a cabal conspiracy. Again, just me talking about this, some liberal is going to be like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. What about what I just said is conspiracy? It's all fact. It's all happening. It's just your choice if you want to ignore it or not. So tell me, what do you guys think? Is this pointing to the Great Reset, which it seems like it is to me? It seems like they're trying to take us into this area of we own nothing, especially real estate, and we're happy about it somehow. Is that the direction we're going? Or do you think this is just overblown? They've been doing this for a long time and there's still going to be plenty of houses for people like you and me to go buy? Let me know in the comments. What I know, some man from China donated 4 trillion South African rand and got looted by politicians. Wow. California State Bill 1079. This is pitching as prioritizing Californians buying foreclosures rather than corporations, but state, county, and city governments are also priority buyers. So that kind of feeds into what I'm talking about. My dad works for a company that makes chrome. There are only a handful of companies that make this chemical. China bought the South African company, and the long-term view is that they're going to shift the company to China. Wow. In California, the government can buy real estate like Blackrock, and it can actually give itself priority in bidding. That's so funny. So what you're saying is with this bill 1079, they can say, oh, you everyday people, you got to put more money down, blah, blah, blah. Interest rates go up. It's harder. You can't afford as much, blah, blah, blah. And we get priority over you. Again, you'll own nothing, especially if you're in a liberal state. You'll own nothing, and you're going to be happy about it. That's the Great Reset. It's crazy. Houses in Utah are selling within hours. My home, bought it in 2016, has almost doubled in price. Wow. California State Bill 1079. Yeah. Fines for not maintaining property in California has been granted. Will this turn California into a giant homeowners association? I don't know, but governments love taxes. They do, bro. They definitely do. Death by 2030, most won't own any assets. It's sad to say. It's scary. Blackrock has been buying since 2008 crash. They have rentals everywhere. Yeah, you're not wrong, Mark. So I think it puts people like me in a tough spot because I'm a renter. And I don't want to buy a house right now in Florida because the market is crazy. You know what I mean? If the market crashed, you'd look back at this and be like, why did I buy a house then? I just think it puts us all in an interesting position. But I think where we can kind of work around it is by being in control of our financial future as much as possible. Knowing about cryptocurrency, knowing about how to trade Forex, knowing about how to position yourself in the right assets so that if asset prices